Hello and welcome to CNBC TV 18 Prime. You're watching Global Lens and I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are the top global headlines we're tracking. White House ramps up the rhetoric as US hits India with 50% tariffs. Trade advisor Peter Navarro terms Indian negotiations and negotiators as arrogant and dubs Russia's Ukraine invasion as Modi's war. India stands its ground. Government sources say US must set aside 25% additional tariffs before any trade deal can be concluded. Prime Minister Modi will visit China for the first time in 7 years, meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday. Sources say the government is considering facilitating Chinese investments in certain sectors by modifying an order passed in 2020. Russian forces bombed over 20 locations in Ukrainian capital Kyiv overnight. At least 18 people, including children, are killed. Zelensky calls for fresh sanctions on Russia, says Moscow chooses ballistics instead of ending the war. Straight to the day's global market action. Markets across Asia were mixed as investors decoded the Bank of Korea's policy decision. China's Shanghai, Korea's Kospi and Japan's Nikkei ended higher, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng ended in the red. Tariff jitters in Dalal Street saw the Sensex fall over 700 points, with financials, real estate and IT stocks dragging the market lower. Indian equities have lost a market cap worth nearly 10 lakh crore rupees in the last two trading sessions. European markets were also mixed, while Wall Street fell after the S&P 500 hit record highs post Nvidia's earnings. Our top story now. India faces a 50% tariff on most of its exports to the US after the additional 25% penalty came into effect yesterday. More than 60% of India's exports to the US now face a 50% tariff. Only India and Brazil have been hit with the highest tariff rate of 50%. President Trump, while announcing the penalty levy earlier this month, had accused India of fueling Moscow's war machine by buying Russian oil. However, United States has not penalized China, whose Russian oil imports exceed that of India. The White House has ramped up its rhetoric in the last 24 hours. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in an interview to Fox News, accused New Delhi of tapping the US along on trade deal negotiations. Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, said that India can get rid of the additional 25% levy if it stops buying Russian oil. Navarro termed Indian negotiators arrogant and dubbed Russia's Ukraine invasion as Modi's war. Meanwhile, economic advisor Kevin Hassett called the relationship between India and the US a complicated one. He also added that if India does not budge on trade, he doesn't think the president will either. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said that India is experiencing the cost of supporting Putin, and others like China and Brazil may as well do soon. India has stood its ground. Government sources say US must set aside 25% additional tariffs before any trade deal can be concluded. The sixth round of negotiations have been postponed, but sources say efforts are on to schedule it soon. The Finance Ministry has said that while the immediate impact of the US tariffs is limited, secondary effects cannot be ruled out. The ministry added that these tariffs will affect the Indian industry unless the trade uncertainty is resolved. I caught up with Atul Keshap, President of the US-India Business Council, and began by asking him about the possibility of a pause on the additional tariffs on India.
Look, my sense of this is that there's always an opportunity for discussion. You know, great powers have needs and interests with one another, and they should talk to one another. So if we can divorce emotion and passion from the discussion, if we can talk to one another about what our needs are, what our potential differences of opinion are, then I do think there can always be an outcome. You know, between the great powers, there are discussions about off-ramps, about glide scopes for various pathways of activity. Things don't have to turn on a dime. Indeed, two vast countries like the United States and India cannot turn on a dime, but we can have constructive discussions about glide paths toward better outcomes that are good for both of us. And indeed, we do have an excellent and multifaceted relationship, and that should be preserved.
So if we were to delve a little deeper, what can both sides do in order to get out of this situation, put the relationship back on track?
So for India, I think, first of all, India is a very proud country. It's a sovereign nation. It's a vast democracy. It is a growing power, the fourth largest economy on earth. For India, though, this is a bit of a tough moment because something like 60 billion of India's 87 billion in goods exports to America will be affected by a 50% tariff. And these are in labor intensive industries like jewelry and seafood and shoe wear and other things. And so it will put, a much higher price on those items, and it will therefore reduce India's competitiveness. Meanwhile, there are other countries that have arranged trade deals with the United States, like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, many others, that will try to take advantage because they'll have more preferential access to the vast American market. And it is a $30 trillion market. So for India, I think, the Prime Minister has been very clear that there needs to be greater efficiency in the system. He espoused some very ambitious goals at Red Fort on his Independence Day speech. He's also gathered his bureaucrats to talk about ways to innovate across the Indian system to reduce friction for businesses and investors, to reduce regulation and red tape, to improve the tax treatment for investors. And these are all laudatory and commendable and will help draw the eye of investors, Indian, American, global, to see what can be done in India, given India's remarkable growth story. And India has also invested very heavily in improving its infrastructure, ports, airports, roadways, speed of doing business, trade facilitation. These are also important. But I think it reveals that India still has some efficiencies to capture and that very important and disciplined work is needed to do to help those affected industries to become even more efficient and competitive, given the rather steep slope they now have to climb. For the United States, I think there's a desire to sort of see India kind of help lend its effort to some of the large geographic and global problems that the United States faces. Ukraine, first of the list. I think the president is very sincere when he says he wants to end the war in Ukraine. If India can offer help in some meaningful way toward ending that war, I think it will very greatly improve the current situation with the United States.
Right, that's an important point. And that brings me to my next question. Currently, President Trump seems to be using India as leverage in talks with Putin. What if this doesn't really impact Putin's decision-making vis-a-vis the war or any possible ceasefire that the US is trying to bring about? Do you expect that there could be now, after secondary tariffs, secondary sanctions against Indian entities? And that could be a big blow to the relationship. What about a crackdown on H-1B visas, for example? Do you feel that as a next step, US could increase the pressure in India?
Well, Parikshit Ji, to be very honest, anything is possible. And I think every lever and instrument may be on the table. And this is where we sort of have to step back, be a bit dispassionate, think about how we got to where we are, and think about how we can walk back toward what we used to be back in February when that rather wonderful joint statement came out between the president and the prime minister in the Oval Office in Washington. My dad always told me that you get an A for effort, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is as long as you put in full effort. And if you look at how the U.S. is handling world affairs right now, it is engaged very extensively with the Russians, of all people right now, to try to end this war. Now, you can think whatever you want about the Russians, but the fact is there's a lot of talking going on. There are Chinese negotiation teams heavily engaged with the United States right now on addressing some of our concerns vis-a-vis trade with China. We're engaging with the Europeans. We have differences of opinions with our friends, but yet we talk, Canada, Mexico, etc. I think that at the leader level, there needs to be more conversation in order to get us back to where we used to be. There needs to be some discussion about, as I said, glide paths for ways to get back to the collaboration that has benefited both of us. And so I would hope that these other instruments that you mentioned will not come into play. But a part of that is that every country sort of have a good and clear line of communication, and that we talk about each other's needs, and we start to see how we can work toward addressing each other's needs as friends do. And so there may be things India needs from us that we need from them that we should talk through and see how we can come to a mutual accommodation, as we have done many times in the past. So for a diplomat, the answer is always to talk, but then the talking should be private. It should be respectful of each other. It should be the talking that friends do in private to work through an issue. And I would hope that that can happen so that we don't see some of these other instruments come to play. And indeed, you're seeing some indication of it in some of the statements coming out of Washington. And personally, as an advocate of the relationship, I would rather the U.S.-India get back on a path of continued engagement and partnership across the many, many realms of our multifaceted relationship.
Right. My final question to you would be, there are sectors which are exempted from reciprocal and additional tariffs right now, like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, iPhones, mobile phones for that matter, iPads. Do you see investments in these sectors from US to India getting impacted? What is the question, the number one question that US businesses who were looking at India as a manufacturing destination asking you right now?
So that's a very important question, Parikshit ji, and I really do commend and laud the Indian government and the Prime Minister for undertaking a program of hopefully will be sweeping reforms to help reduce friction within the Indian ecosystem for investors vis-a-vis other countries that have done a lot of homework as well. So if that continues, that will, of course, draw the eye of investors. But there's also a psychological element. You know, there's the old adage that trade follows the flag. Well, it may not necessarily always be true. Businesses are independent in our great free and open societies. They make their own decisions based on shareholder value and the decisions of the investment committee. But business also looks at the psychological intangibles of what's going on. And when there is friction between the United States and India, they will have to consider that. There is uncertainty right now because of the absence of a trade agreement between the United States and India. The U.S. has stitched up trade deals with all kinds of countries in the last 6 months, but we haven't done that with India. So if you're an investment committee anywhere, whether you're an Indian company investing in America, as many have done substantially, or an American company looking at India, you're going to wonder what that uncertainty might do to a $10 or $20 billion investment decision if all of a sudden the policy parameters stated by the governments change. And so there's a lot of risk right now. Uncertainty is not good for planning. It is a tax on planning. And therefore, I really urge the governments to sort of put this genie back in the bottle, get back to talking, figure out how we can be mutually relevant to each other, how we can advance each other's needs, because that's what friends do, and get business to the point where it feels truly confident to invest in these crucial areas where if the free countries of the world don't innovate, then the adversaries will at our expense.
All right, so that was Atul Keshap of USIBC saying it's time for leader-level conversations to resolve these trade tensions because uncertainty is not good for businesses. It's time for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. Prime Minister Modi embarks on the first visit to Japan in 7 years. Why is this visit crucial? We'll get you more on this on the other side. Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarks on a two-day visit to Japan. He will arrive in Tokyo for the 15th India-Japan Annual Summit with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. This will be Modi's first summit with his new Japanese counterpart and his first visit to Japan in nearly 7 years. The last was in 2018. It also marks his 8th trip to Japan since taking office in 2014. This time, the agenda is squarely focused on strengthening bilateral ties. So what do those ties really look like as of today? Japan's investments in India have been accelerating in the last 2 years alone. Over 170 MOUs worth more than $13 billion have been signed. Big-ticket commitments include Suzuki Motors' 35,000 crore rupee plan for a new Gujarat plant, Nippon Steel's 1,500 crore rupee expansion plan, and Toyota Kirloskar's 3,300 crore rupee investment in Karnataka. Beyond large corporates, Japanese partnerships are drawing Indian SMEs into global supply chains. Take Tokyo Electron and Fujifilm's collaboration with Tata Electronics. It has enabled Indian suppliers to deliver high-value components to international markets. Partnerships with Toyota, Suzuki and Fujitsu are helping Indian SMEs access global practices, cutting-edge technology and new markets, boosting India's export competitiveness. Japan's cooperation is also shaping India's rural economy. Sojitz Corporation, for example, is investing $395 million in green energy alongside Indian Oil, while Suzuki is working with the National Dairy Development Board and local cooperatives to strengthen rural livelihoods. Collaboration extends to exports and manufacturing as well. Toyota and Suzuki's joint venture is producing hybrid cars in India for export to Africa, the Middle East and Southeast Asia. A recent MOU between the government of Assam and ASEAN Holdings underscores Japan's commitment to developing India's northeast with investments in infrastructure, logistics and agro-industries. At the Japan-India-Africa Forum and the 9th TICAD Summit in Tokyo, India also emerged as a key partner for connectivity and industrial corridors, highlighting its role as an anchor country in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. The vision is clear: make in India, make for the world. The India-Japan partnership is about more than economics. It's about regional resilience, security and shared futures. Together, the two nations are investing in industries, supply chains, people and knowledge, shaping a stronger tomorrow. I caught up with Indian Ambassador to Japan, Sibi George, and began by asking him about the significance of the Prime Minister's visit to Japan at this juncture.
India and Japan, we have excellent relationship. Today, our relationship, what we call special strategic and global partnership. This is an agreement which our Prime Minister and the then Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Abe, entered into in 2014. It has been more than 10 years since then. During this 10-year period, we have seen significant progress in our relationship. The entire spectrum of relationship possible between two countries. When you say special, it is indeed a special partnership. It is special, strategic, and global partnership. In each of these areas, we have made significant progress. And this visit would undertake a full review of the progress we have made. And of course, it will come up with a new roadmap to take our relationship forward to new high levels.
Right. If I were to ask you about the agenda, could you give us some of the major economic, defense, strategic items on the agenda?
See, each of these areas which you mentioned, we would be having discussions on that and come up with a roadmap to take it forward. For example, on the economic side, if you look at it, Japan has always been a very important partner in India's economic progress. 40 years ago, Suzuki came and transformed India's automobile sector. We have seen its growth in Japan's involvement in India's growth at various sectors. Today, when we are working towards what we call an Amrit Kal period, we consider Japan as an important partner, a reliable partner in our developmental journey towards 2047. When you look at the economic factors, there are several factors. The new and high-end technology, of course, our traditional trade and business engagement. There are 1,500 Japanese companies in India today. There are more than 5,000 Japanese business establishments in India. These are 1,500 success stories. We would like to have a quantum leap in our relationship, in our economic relationship. India is the fourth largest economy in the world, growing 6.5 to 7% growth. It is an opportunity for Japan. So we would be focusing on our traditional economic relationship and also new and technology like semiconductors, like quantum computing, critical technology, critical minerals. There are so many areas, space technology, science and technology, innovation, so many areas we would be working together during this visit and also have a roadmap to take it forward.
Ambassador George, when you said that we were looking for a quantum leap in our economic relations, could you give us a sense the quantum of trade between the two countries right now? And what will be the conversation? What is the ambition that could be laid out during the visit and the meeting of the two prime ministers for the next 10 years?
See, when you look at our relationship today, as I said, we have these 1,500 Japanese companies. These are 1,500 success stories. These companies have come to India, invested in India, and participated in India's program for Make in India and also now Make for the World. you take any company, say for example, the Suzuki company. It came to India, established well. Now Suzuki cars are being made in India, but also for the world, for Africa, for Japan itself. The Suzuki cars are coming here. So this is the model which we can apply to many other sectors. And now we are seeing it in other sectors like, for example, the air conditioning sector. Daikin company is doing exactly the same thing. Invest in India, make in India, bring technology, work together with the Indian market, Indian skilled workers, and technology in India, and also make in India for the world. This is a success story which we can replicate in many sectors, including in the new and critical technology sectors.
Right. What would be some of the key agreements and MOUs that could be signed during the visit?
Oh, that would be. I can tell you that we are looking at a very important MOUs and joint declarations covering the entire spectrum of relationship. See, as I said, 10 years is an important period to undertake a full review, and that review will be undertaken, and the roadmap, the vision document for the next 10 years would be released.
A vision document for the next 10 years would be released. I would also like to ask you, you touched upon critical minerals, sir. Currently, of course, there was a problem that the Indian industry was facing because of China's restrictions on rare earth magnets. Even as that situation is now improving, there have been certain positive messaging between India and China. But when it comes to possibly sourcing high rare earth magnets from Japan, are there any conversations? Could there be any kind of agreement on that front?
I would not like to comment specifically on the specific discussions which would be undertaken by the leaders, but I can tell you that since two important leaders of two big countries, two major countries in Indo-Pacific are meeting at a very significant, very important time in geopolitical and geoeconomics situation today, I'm sure that a series of issues related to critical technology, critical minerals and other issues will come up during the discussions.
Right. On the defense side, what is your expectation? Are we going to see some MOUs, closer collaboration on defense manufacturing?
If you look at India-Japan relationship, you can see that in the last few years, there has been significant progress in our defense engagement. All the three major exercises, actually four major exercises, Navy, Air Force, Army, and Coast Guard exercises have been taking place between the two countries regularly. We have also had a regular engagement at the political level, including the defense ministers. We had the 2+2 meeting, foreign minister and defense minister meeting last year. The defense minister of Japan visited India in May this year. So a series of engagements have taken place. And of course, one of the important points of discussion at each of these meetings is how do we work together for defense technology cooperation and also defense equipment cooperation.
Right. You know, the Ministry of External Affairs has said that there is some sort of discussion going on between the navies and also on shipbuilding. Could you throw some light on that, sir, as to what kind of a collaboration we're looking at over the next 5 to 10 year period?
Yeah, this is one of the areas we are discussing. As I said, in defense technology areas, there is a series of collaborations which we are working on. The Ministry of External Affairs had pointed out in the briefing about the Unicorn, the antenna for the Navy ships. So that is one of the areas we are working together and making progress. There are other areas related to shipping as well we are making progress.
Ambassador, you interact with Indian and Japanese companies on a daily basis. If we were to ask you about areas of interest where India is closely seeking investments from Japan, FDI from Japan, what would those be? And do you see some important FDI announcements in the pipeline, maybe not during this visit, but in the coming months?
Maybe during this visit itself.
Okay. Could you give us some color on that?
No, what I was trying to say is that in our economic engagement, it is a mutually beneficial partnership. We have seen success stories. And Japan, at every corner of this country, there is a growing realization that India is an opportunity. In 2022, Japan had agreed to invest to the tune of 5 trillion yen in the next 5 years, that is by 2027. I am happy to note that we have already made significant progress in that investment, public-private partnership investment, which has happened since 2022. Till date, we have reached a very important milestone in that investment program. Now we are looking at further investment. And also, let's not forget, India is in the process of becoming a manufacturing hub for the world. And Japan is a country based on industry. They would like to use India as a manufacturing hub also for their exports to other countries like Africa. Recently, I participated in the TICAD meeting, and one of the important announcements during the TICAD meeting related to Africa was that India will be developed as a manufacturing hub for export to Africa.
Right. I'd also like to ask you about the bullet train project. There have been meetings in the run-up to the Prime Minister's visit, and both sides are discussing developments related to the Shinkansen bullet train project to connect Ahmedabad and Mumbai. Are some timelines clear now, and are we expecting some announcements on this during the Prime Minister's visit?
Japan has always been a partner of India in our infrastructure projects, many projects. You are aware of that. And one of the projects is the MAHSR project, which we have been working on. All that I can tell you is that in 2027, there will be a train running in that sector.
27, we'll have a train running in that sector. Okay, that's important. I would also like to ask you about the conversation around tariffs. How will India and Japan now work more closely together, trade more closely together in the context of the global trade war situation?
See, I already mentioned that in this geopolitical, geoeconomic situation, India and Japan, being very important countries, would discuss every aspect related to that geopolitical, geoeconomic situations. So I would like to leave it at that.
Okay, my final question, sir, would be about cooperation on the Indo-Pacific. Of course, both the Prime Ministers will discuss the Quad. How do you see India and Japan taking cooperation for the Quad Summit forward? Because right now, we're not very clear as to whether we will have a Quad Summit this year or not. The dates are yet to be announced. But overall, what is the kind of push do you expect for the Quad in this meeting?
See, when we talk about India-Japan relationship, it is a special, strategic, and global partnership. It has bilateral elements in it. It has also plurilateral elements in it. And on the plurilateral part, we have a few, forums like what you mentioned, Quad, we have G4, we have G20. In fact, my Prime Minister was a guest at the G7 summit, which was held in Hiroshima in 2023. So we participate, we actively cooperate, we work together in many of these forums, plurilateral for us. And one of them is Quad. And Quad is four like-minded countries came together, important countries in the Indo-Pacific region for peace, stability, and prosperity in Indo-Pacific and beyond. We have a concrete, positive agenda for Quad. So each of our countries, India and Japan, consider Quad as a very important factor in our plurilateral relationship, and it will continue to be like that.
On Final Cut this evening, Argentine President Javier Milei was escorted away from a public event in Buenos Aires province after protesters hurled rocks and other objects at him. The president was riding on the back of a moving pickup truck with his security team and his sister, who also serves as his chief of staff while campaigning for the upcoming elections.